Hello, and welcome to the first part of the second half of Area Study 2 about the government's domestic macroeconomic goals. Today we're going to start talking about the goal of low inflation, essentially just going into exactly what the government goal is, and then a little bit more about how that goal then impacts upon living standards. So this one, some of you may be doing this before economic growth. My group was doing it after economic growth. This is all about how prices rise and how rising prices impacts production and living standards. So I always like to include a little reference up here because I think of balloons when I think of inflation. But let's jump into the definition. So inflation occurs when the prices paid for a range of goods and services is generally rising. So those prices are going up on average. So just across all goods and services, in general, they are rising. That's not going to happen for all goods and services. Some things might go down in price, some things might go up, but on average, across all goods and services, if prices are going up or down. This means that as prices rise, our money or income loses its purchasing power. So this means that at the moment you might have $10 and you might buy 10 things. But if prices rise, that $10 might only buy you 9 things. And if that's only buying you 9 things later on, that means you have less purchasing power, you're getting less out of your money, your living standards may fall, which leads into our definition for the goal of low inflation, which is the goal of low inflation is achieved when the general level of prices of goods and services are increasing fairly slowly within a target range of 2 to 3% on average over time. So I cut a little bit out of this to make it a little bit quicker and shorter. So increasing, if the general level of prices of goods and services are increasing at a rate of 2 to 3% on average over time, that's perfect, at a rate. And then that's covering, this is much simpler than the definition for the goal for economic growth or in full employment. It's short to the point. One really important part here, so your target band, so 2 to 3%, very important. Also, this on average over time is incredibly important that students often forget. So we often judge inflation over like an economic cycle, which is often 3 to 5 years. And so if we're not meeting the goal in 1 year, that might not necessarily mean that we haven't met the goal. But on average over time, many students just stop their definition at 2 to 3%, but that's not correct. That on average over time is the really important thing to get full marks. So like if you do not have that part, you are not getting full marks for your definition. Really important. So let's have a bit of a discussion about a couple things. We didn't mean to say discussion because it's very one-sided. I'm just talking at you. Maybe you're talking back to your TV or screen or device, you weirdo. But would an inflation rate of 0% be beneficial to an economy? So if prices weren't rising at all, let's talk about the implications of that. If prices are not rising, well, you've got to think as a consumer, you're probably like, that's good. I can buy the same amount or more if my income rises. That's great. But it's bad for an economy. We'd like a little bit of prices rising because it gives incentive to businesses to continue to produce. If businesses see prices are rising slowly over time, not too much, but slowly rising over time, it means that they are going to continue producing goods and services because they see the profit incentive, relative prices rising, etc. Also from consumption though, if you know, say you want to buy a PS5, which is really hard to do at the moment, unless you're someone in my class who likes to buy and sell them. If you want to buy a PS5, they're like $750. Let's just say there's plenty of them in supply, and you know that price isn't going to change, or if you know that price is going to go down to say $500, are you going to buy it now? No, you're probably going to wait. If you know prices aren't going to change or they're going to decrease, you aren't going to consume. So that means aggregate demand is going to go down. So prices increasing a little bit, so that 2 to 3% on average over time is really positive for the economy because it means that people are forced to buy things now because they're worried they might be more expensive later on. So 0% is bad because people will save their money or they won't buy things because there's no urgency to do so. What about an inflation rate of 10%? That would be equal to hyperinflation. Well, living standards would go significantly down. Aggregate demand would plummet as people would not be spending, which means that economic growth would then plummet. Unemployment would rise. It would be very bad. Prices obviously increasing at a rate like that, that would really negatively impact low-income earners. So that's why we don't want inflation of 10%. It'd be bad. Our money would be near worthless. So how it affects living standards just kind of follows on from that really nicely. Inflation can slow the rate of economic growth. So inflation reduces the efficiency of resource allocation and slows economic growth as resource owners want to maximize their incomes and returns. So if prices are rising, that's the prices of everything. So that would mean that it's an increased cost of production because inputs are more expensive. Great. And if inputs are more expensive, business is going to pass on that cost to you, or they're going to produce less. So that means less production overall. This is not what you want. Inflation also drives up interest rates. So the RBA, one of the first things they do is fight inflation first. So if inflation is above the target band, they tend to increase interest rates, because as soon as you increase interest rates, it's going to have a lot of effects on people, but it also means businesses aren't going to invest because they're going to be more incentivized to save rather than production and expansion. And we'll get onto how that affects consumers later on. So it slows the rate of economic growth because decreased efficiency and more incentive to save rather than produce. Inflation can lead to increases in structural unemployment. So inflation can increase this by undermining the international competitiveness of Australian producers. If our inflation rate is increasing at a rate higher than our trading partners, it means we're going to be less internationally competitive as our goods and services become more expensive in comparison to foreign substitutes. So this can cause structural unemployment, which is where unemployment is caused by many factors, including changes that occur in business profitability, the way goods and services are produced, the use of new technology, and other cost-cutting developments. Essentially, this means that workers will be laid off as businesses cut down their overall labour force. It also have an adverse effect on our trade balance, like we were saying before, hurting our competitiveness. So consumers often will then switch to cheaper foreign alternatives, which can lead to a rise in our current account deficit, which is basically the balance of money coming into Australia versus money leaving Australia. It will mean we're importing more and therefore more money is leaving Australia. There's more leakages, a greater decrease in our aggregate demand and less injections coming in, and may even cause a fall in the exchange rate. These two things are going to become very important in Area State 3. Currently, you kind of just need to know vaguely what they are and the impacts they have, but in Area State 3, we're really going to hammer down on them. And there are some videos about them up already if you want to go into that in more detail. Lastly, inflation can alter income distribution in arbitrary ways. Arbitrary is a fancy way of saying like ways that aren't fair or unspecific, but inflation greatly impacts low-income earners more than high-income earners. So, for example, if you're on a wage of $100, which is not a real wage, compared to someone who earns $1 million, if inflation goes up by, say, 5%, this person on $100 is far more greatly affected. It's going to hurt their living standards a lot more because this person on $1 million isn't going to really notice a 5% difference. Like they're just going to keep paying it, and therefore it's not going to affect them as much. So with inflation, exporters become less competitive, so their sales, incomes, and living standards may fall, and importers may have the opposite impact. So if you're importing, then you're going to be better off because you're going to be more competitive. Families with variable interest rates may find a higher proportion of their income going towards interest repayments because once inflation gets too high, the RBA increases the cash rate and interest rates. Therefore, more income is going towards paying off home loans rather than purchasing goods and services to satisfy living standards. Therefore, living standards fall. Also, due to increased structural unemployment, more people are moving onto welfare, which reduces their income, purchasing power, and living standards. Especially now, job seeker, job keeper tending to go away, job seeker being the welfare version of it, and it's only been increased by a slight amount per week. That, as people become unemployed due to inflation, not that inflation is an issue right now, that can really negatively impact their living standards overall. All right, so that's it for this first little video on inflation rate. And so this is kind of updating. We had videos last year about but the first ones I ever did. The audio basically came from me speaking into iPod headphones, which was not very effective at all. So just updating them. There's probably going to be 4 or 5 videos in this series about inflation, then some more about full employment. As always, feel free to check out my website if you need any resources or anything supplemental in economics. If you are a student, hit me up with the message and I'll give you some discounts, sweet discounts for them. It's about 50% off for students. Other than that, there's some great stuff about Taskwords on there. If you buy stuff, I'll probably send you a pen at some point because now I have branded merchandise. Look at this. Look at that beautiful pen. Look at that. Don't you want to write with that? That's going to be wonderful. Other than that, also go there, go to the website, join the Discord. The Discord's been great. Students start helping other students. Teachers from various schools are helping students. There is a vast array of knowledge and skills in this one place. I think there's about 60 people on it now. So it's growing. This YouTube channel is growing. We just hit 300 subscribers. So good job watching this. And other than that, I hope you have a wonderful day. And if you have any questions, hit me up. Catch you later. Bye.